Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Titanforge podcast. My name is Dratnos. Joining me this week is Tettles, as with every week, but joining us not this week is Trell. And also, you may notice that it's not sunny outside, as you may expect it to be on at noon when we normally record Pacific time. So, what has happened is, Tettles, you are graduating this weekend or something, right? You have
I have some graduation stuff to tend to. Some friends are graduating. I'm not graduating.
Friends are graduating. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm gone whenever this would previously be recorded at noon PST on Saturday, but I'm not going to be home, so we have to record it a bit in advance.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Trell also unavailable this weekend or now, so we are recording in advance. We're pre-recording this week. We're going to try not to do this too often, but we decided this would be better than not doing anything, so we're releasing this episode, and that's the story behind it. This week we're going to talk about ranged DPS, how to play it, why it's good, and thoughts on that. And then also we're going to talk about the upcoming Essence system, what we know so far about the Essences, some ones that have been controversial that we've learned about from the PTR, and we'll discuss the controversy and our opinions on that. And yeah, those are our two topics for the show this week. But first, let's talk a little bit about, I guess, just how the week has been for us. Tettles, what have you been up to in WoW the past week?
So my guild actually killed not this week. I know that your guild also killed it this week. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Dretno Shaman is very powerful.
Oh, yeah.
I unfortunately was not in on the kill, as I was actually in Storm Shelter because we had a tornado warning. So
oh, no.
I had to step out. Yeah, it was like, I'll get the kill eventually. I'm not too concerned.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you were in for like almost all progress, right?
Yeah, I mean, I more care about being in on progression than I actually necessarily care about like getting the last like 3 pulls that get the kill. Is where does that sound?
Yeah, usually there are like 22 or 23 people that contribute to progression on each boss fight, and so by definition, 2 or 3 of them aren't going to be able to get that first kill. But for all intents and purposes, that's you killed it. IMO.
How are you liking the bursting skittish week this week? Big
bursting
fan?
skittish. It's been fun. Yeah, I've tanked my first keys of this expansion pack on my warrior, so that's been good. It's been
big
a blast.
clap boy.
Oh yeah, Dratnos XD, the protection warrior. We timed, let's see, an 11 and another 11, I think. So no big deal. I was 3rd place in damage as well on my 380 warrior.
Yo, let's go, dude.
Yeah. I did not notice skittish like at all. Like I had to taunt a couple things, but you just go in there, you avatar, and you're doing more damage than everybody anyway. So it doesn't affect you.
Yeah, I've been playing my warrior a bit this week. He lobbed, and I'm really bad at him. We almost chested a 21 at Taltazar, but I feel like I do not know what I'm doing at all. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, I've definitely. I mean, obviously, like I've just started playing this deck this week, but you definitely have a lot of that experience of like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do right now? It's unclear, and I'm dying. I just hope thank goodness I'm playing with a great healer, right? Just like they're life cocooning you or they're iron barking you, and you're okay. But yeah. Other than that, keys have been good. I don't know. Like I play rogue. My main is a rogue, so skittish week's obviously great for that. You got vanish for if you pull threat, and tricks to make sure you don't. So. It's just good all around. Bursting is really the main affix that like is a pain this week, I think.
Oh yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I think bursting just in general is slightly overtuned in terms of how much damage it does, but most of the time you're actually able to kind of pull around it easily enough to where you're not killing yourself.
Yeah, it requires you to just not like you need to be careful, right? And that's it's hard. Like sometimes you just have like a 4 stack and it's got a second left on it, and you turn it into a 5 stack, and then you're just like you just added so much extra damage to the pull. Yeah, so that's the thing to avoid. And it's hard. Like that's hard. That requires your group to be focused, basically the whole dungeon, your whole group. And it also makes some specs that do a lot of damage over time. Like I was doing Elemental Shaman Shadow Priest keys, and so just like if there's an earthquake on the ground and there's like a vampiric touch on the target, that you just have no control over when the thing dies. When it's below 10%, it could be any time. So you can't stop rolling stacks under those circumstances.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Moonkin's actually pretty good, even though it is also a dot class, even though I don't have a ton of control over my
Yeah,
dots.
you have the Star Surges though, right? So you use Star Surge something to make it die right at the start of the stack, and like, the nice thing is also like, all the specs we just talked about, all three of them are off
too.
healing specs, so that's a huge upside this week also, being an off healer. Great week for like Retribution Paladin also.
Dude, Ret owns.
It does, yeah, it does. So yeah, that's been what's happening this week in WoW. Let's move on to our first real topic this week, which is range DPS in both raid. We'll talk. I guess Mythic Unad is kind of something that has been on our mind recently, and both of us have just finished with Mythic Unad progression on range DPS characters. So for me, that's been new. For me, I played melee on every fight. It's since Coven of Shivara, where I played a warlock on that one. But other than that, I've been melee every raid fight I've ever done. Yeah.
Coven of Shivara, that was a great melee fight too. I remember that.
Yeah, that one I came in on my warlock and just, instead of being on my rogue, it was good. That was a good swap there as well. But on Unat I played Elemental Shaman, which was extremely good for that fight. Not only does it so Mythic Unat's just this fight where there's these ads that you can put flame shocks on, and flame shocks, especially with the right trait setup, give you a bunch of damage onto your main target. Which Elemental Shaman, like, it's really important. Boss damage is important, and there's like free ads to dot, so Elemental loves that. And then also there's this storm mechanic where you need to use this storm to kill off the ads, but if you press the button, you're going to keep storming for 15 seconds, and that does a lot of damage to your whole raid, and everybody does 50% less damage while it's happening. So it's really important to, like, most strategies involve having somebody start storming and then die, and so Shaman can onk, and that doesn't cost a B-res, but everybody else it would cost a B-res for. Now it turns out on our kill, this didn't matter at all, because we ended the fight with just all three of our battle reses completely intact. Nobody died except for people who were supposed to die. So it could have been any spec, but for most of progression, it's really important to have Shaman doing that so that you can preserve your battle reses through the sacrifice.
What do you actually think about Unat, like, by design? I actually had this question asked me a little, like, a couple days ago. So I think in general, like, my personal opinion is I think the fight is designed, like, I like how, like, challenging, like, the last phase is, and, like, I enjoy, like, the phase dynamic of the fight, but then I really struggle to enjoy, like, how class stacky that whole entire fight is, just because of, like, range DPS and movement on the fight with the resonance and stuff like that. And then in addition to that, like you were stating, the cheese stuff with how you end up onking because you don't want to channel the full 15-second storm. So basically the reason that you end up using onk and dying and stuff like that is because when you're channeling the storm from that helmet, you're going to be putting a decreased damage dealt buff or debuff on the entire raid. And so it's better off to just, like, kill yourself off quickly. You see it in phase 3, and you see it in phase 2 pretty readily. So it's just like, those are my issues with the fight, but what do you actually think about the fight itself, Dratnos?
Yeah, so on the whole, I think it was a good fight. I think it was very hard, and that was cool. I think that the unstable resonance mechanic was good. With the, like, it was fun to play. It was really fun to play. You felt, I don't know, there was a good feeling of, like, mastery over it when you started feeling, like, really confident with, like, predicting how people were going to move and, like, moving with the resonance. So I liked that part about it. The class stacking incentives, yeah, those are bad, and the onk strategy, I don't think that onk strategies should be supported, whether with onk or with reincarnation totem. So I think that this, like, the solution on this fight, and this is what I was saying week 1, is that they should make it so that the storm just keeps channeling. Like, if you start channeling the storm, it just happens for 15 seconds, and balance around that every time. I don't think the sacrifices are particularly, like, fun thing to have in the fights, and it was pretty punishing. Like, as great as my shaman ended up being to have in on that fight, like, I could have also been on a rogue that would have also been good. Like, would have done not comparable boss damage. It would have been pretty comparable boss damage. I think the shaman would have done more, but
the shaman does big damn, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised actually by how, like, so I switched to it like 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks before the kill, having never spec'd or elemental on that character. It was like a 380 enhancement shaman. Yeah, so it was I was not expecting it to, like, it was just, at the time we were just like, we need this onk. Like, we don't have shaman on the roster, we just need an onk so badly that we'll play this. And then we ended up being able to get it very geared very quickly. But at the start of that process, I would definitely not have expected it to be any good at the end of it. So I'm glad that worked out, but I don't think that it should be necessary. to have specific classes on the roster like that. But I understand, like, for mythic fights like Unat, it's okay. It's the end boss. Having those kind of mechanics, I think, is better to have from time to time than to never take a risk with a fight when they're designing it. But I think that, like, after the first week, when they were watching, like, Method or whatever do their progression, and when they were applying those week 1 buffs, like, during progression, I think, or nerfs during progression, I think that one of them should have been like, okay, we make the storm a lot less punishing, we make it only last 5 seconds or whatever, and we make it keep going if you sacrifice, and then, problem solved.
So where would you rank it relative to, like, the other BFA fights in bosses that we've seen so far with Gahun and Jaina? So for me personally, I actually think it's better than both Gahun and Jaina. I thought Gahun was a bit lackluster with just, like, the balls and the running, and then Jaina, to me, I don't know. I didn't like phase 1 of Jaina. I thought it was a bit rough, whereas, like, phase 1, 2, and 3 of Unat feel like they're all challenging and unique in their own different ways, and I felt like the progression of Unat felt a lot better than Jaina for me. So I think it's better than all 3 of those, but it does also have issues.
Yeah, I would put it above a lot of fights, largely just because it was, like, so hard, which I think is it's really nice when you're progressing a hard boss fight, because it feels annoying to be wiping to easy stuff. Like, and by easy stuff, I just mean that stuff that you don't. The nice thing about Unat is that for the entirety of progression on it, I felt like I was learning new stuff that I could do. Now, part of that might also be that I was playing a spec that I had never played before.
Yeah.
So that might be where I'm projecting that feeling on or from, but. I really enjoyed it. I think I would put it over Gahun and Jaina. I was pretty high on Gahun also. Like, I liked Gahun.
Okay.
I quite enjoyed that fight. Against, like, Legion end bosses, I definitely, okay, obviously it's over Xavius. Probably below Gul'dan. Gul'dan was insane.
Gul'dan, yeah. I would say it's below Helya too.
Below Helya, below Kil'jaeden, probably above Argus for me though.
I didn't like Argus. Yeah, I think I agree with that. I also didn't like Kil'jaeden, but I have, like. We had, like, 550 pulls on that fight, so there's obviously, like, a very clear reason why I didn't enjoy it.
Kil'jaeden was a tragedy, like, for us too. Yeah.
I just was not a fan of that fight, so I think it's difficult for me to, like, project my thoughts on it just because of, like, how poorly my guild ended up performing on it. And then the boss got nerfed, and then, like 15 guilds killed it, like, instantly the day after the nerf, and we just raided the last out of all those guilds, so we got, like, our kills sniped by a bunch of people, and it just left a sour taste in my mouth to some degree.
Oh yeah, I raid. My raid starts at 9 p.m. Pacific, and so anytime there's, like, Tuesday nerfs that when anybody's close to a kill, we're the last guild to pick it up, it feels bad, but
Titanforge is second.
Titanforge is third this time.
Titanforge is third.
Wait,
that's
no,
right.
We got third. We got third. Yeah.
Because Incarnate went to Titanforge. I forgot.
Incarnate in Essence got us this tier. But still, actually, like, in terms of how we did on the fight, like, world top 50 is a first for us. So I think it's just Tichondria's competition is really getting up there.
Good. Yeah, world top 50 is always really good.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Unat. I think good, and I liked playing ranged on it. I know you've been playing ranged on bosses for time immemorial, right?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever played anything else except for ranged. I mean, I've healed sometimes, but, like...
Okay, that counts,
Still ranged, yeah.
Alright, so we have your long history of experience and then my observations from having just switched from melee to ranged for this fight to carry us through this segment here, which I guess what we kind of want to do here is talk about what... We want to give, like, in 15 minutes, like, an infusion of knowledge that will help you be a better ranged DPS player in raids in particular. So tell us, what do you think the single most important, like, piece of advice you could impart to somebody on being a ranged DPS is in raid?
So I would actually give 2. Perfect. So, like, the first one I would say is, like, make sure that you have foresight and forethought as to, like, what you're going to be doing. Try to be thinking, like, 10 to 15 seconds in advance. I know, like, for Unat specifically, I'd always look at where the relics are positioned in the room and then look at how much resources I have available to me and, like, making sure that I can, like, stutter step my movement across the room, or just make sure that I have, like, movement abilities that I am able to actually pop in order to be able to make sure that I'm able to get to the relics quick enough, or make sure that I'm able to position myself quickly. Because positioning for ranged DPS is, like, one of the most important things, and it's kind of it's kind of different, especially if you're swapping from like a melee like Dratnos is. Making sure that you're positioning yourself like well around the boss and well relative to other people is always very important. And it can kind of get overlooked to some degree by a lot of people. And just like you have to make sure that you position yourself well around other people. And then the second thing would definitely be like casting, like movement while casting. So like I was saying, trying to stutter step, make sure that you end up using your instant cast abilities or your damage globals wherever you're able to actually get in extra damage. Like if you're moving and like you're playing Ellie, make sure that you're like flame shocking on the move or ending up using any other instant cast abilities. Just making sure that you never really want any 0 DPS like globals, or you want like a lot of downtime. So for higher end players, I normally recommend WoW Analyzer in order to look at like your downtime on a fight, just so you can actually just kind of check how many casts you're missing, how many casts you actually could have gotten in. So those are two very important points for range DPS.
Yeah, that's wowanalyzer.com. You paste in your Warcraft logs link, and it'll like look at your cast. It'll provide a lot of information, some of which you should take with a grain of salt, depending on particularly what spec you're playing.
Yes.
But the analysis of like what percentage of the time you were casting and what percent of the time you were doing nothing is definitely something that is worth looking at. Yeah, absolutely. One thing I noticed is like, okay, people talk a lot about how when you're moving, you should use a movement global. But I think that one thing that gets overlooked is the converse of that, which is like if you're in your rotation and you get a global that you can, like an instant cast global proc or something, that's a good time to look at your positioning and be like, is there somewhere that I'd rather be right now? So like this is happening, like I'm on Unet right now. I get a Lava Surge proc, so I can cast an instant cast Lava Burst, and now I have 1.5 seconds where I can move anywhere I want. And I think a lot of people there, like if they don't have to move immediately, are just going to stand still and cast their Lava Burst. But if you can look ahead and be like, all right, the next thing that's going to happen on this fight is there's going to be this AoE effect, and I'd rather be like I could get caught out of position here. Let me move now, right? And that way you're kind of preemptively moving, and you're going to increase the percentage of your globals that are damage, which is good.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I actually kind of struggle with that on New, not specifically too. Like I felt like with the resonance, I always really wanted to make sure that I would over move a lot with the resonance more than I actually needed to, because I felt like I needed to be positioned well enough to not blow up the whole entire raid, and my damage globals also didn't matter. So you should also be thinking about like how much your globals actually mean relative to like where you need to be positioned, because range DPS like positioning is just super finicky sometimes on a lot of fights.
Yeah, that's the hard thing about the spec, right? Is that you really don't have to deal with positioning as a melee very much. When you do, it's awful. It's an awful fight for melee, just kind of by definition.
Yeah, so I would agree with that.
Yeah, like thinking ahead, on Unet, like one thought process I would have is like every time Unstable Resonance would start, I would kind of do a little checklist, like what am I going to do if I get Void? What am I going to do if I get Ocean? And what am I going to do if I get Storm? So that I could just start moving immediately in whatever direction was appropriate if I needed to, or I could identify like, all right, if I get Void here, I'm going to have to move for pretty much all of my 15 seconds to get over there. But if I get one of the other ones, I'll have time to cast for a little while and do it.
Yeah, and then even some other fights like Grong, whenever he drops the fire out of the sky, if you're playing range DPS on that, you can actually kind of see it traveling, so you can actually use one of your movement globals or like a movement ability like Wild Charge or Blink or whatever else in order to be able to get like very quickly out of that ground effect. So you're taking less damage and you're minimizing the time that you need to move, because like what you want to do the least is like cancel a cast whenever it's halfway through. You want to really move on your own terms, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to get put in this position where you just you're just dry on resources. You have no globals that you can do effective damage with while moving, and you just have to move for 5 seconds. That's an awful feeling, and you really don't want to be caught in this position where you're like halfway through a cast and you realize you have to start moving, and you incinerate that time you spent casting that spell to do nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's movement, which I think you could make an argument that movement and positioning is really the crux of being good range DPS and raid. I think another thing also is like you kind of like an understanding of your spec and like understanding where you can make sacrifices from your optimal DPS rotation to increase your amount of movement globals, right? Like where you can overcap on a resource for a little bit if that means that you'll be able to get more movement globals. Because like obviously
potentially taking worse talents too, right? Sometimes
like if you look at the Simcraft, like the action priority list for each spec, it's never gonna do this, right? It's never gonna be like, it's never gonna overcap on a resource or hold a proc when you might proc another one. Like those are just kind of things that aren't in there. But in the real world, you have to make a choice between two bad options, right? You have to choose between having to move and getting in trouble that way, or maybe like you have to move but you saved something, you did your rotation a little bit wrong, like wrong in quotes, and that allows you to get more movement globals in, and therefore it's worth it, right? It's the better of those two options.
Yeah, so a lot of classes, a lot of ranged DPS are very similar in the sense of like you should be sacrificing like your perfect rotation, like Dratnus was saying, for like more mobility or some other like issues. I know for Balance Druid, if you keep up your dots 100% uptime and then you essentially cast random abilities, you only do like 15% less DPS, which is weird, but it's like something that you just have to think of in terms of like how you should be looking to play a fight. In like sacrificing movement normally isn't the case of what you should be looking to do. You should be looking to sacrifice like just making sure that you get in the correct position first and then casting your perfect rotation secondary.
Right, yeah. The positioning is usually the key, and like you can, I don't know, like if you're doing your rotation well, and you're thinking about how you're going to move and you minimize how much total movement you have to do, you're going to do a lot of damage. Like you don't need to execute every global of your rotation perfectly. Like if I think that's one thing that's really important actually, is minimizing your movement globals. Like if you can take the shortest possible path, if you spend 30 seconds moving and your buddy who's playing the same spec spends a minute moving, you're just going to do more damage than them under almost any circumstances, like pretty much regardless of what buttons you pressed when you're not moving. So yeah, it's all thinking ahead. I think you're right. Like there's really not this element of thinking ahead in Melee. Like in Melee, you just kind of push your buttons, and then when a mechanic starts, when a mechanic starts casting, you're just like, okay, what do I have to do for this one? Probably nothing. Keep hitting the boss. But
something like that.
But as a Melee, I'm allowed to say these things. But as a ranged, you really do need to, like, I think it's important to just kind of have this running thought process of like what the next 30 seconds of the fight look like, and that informs your whole play. Okay, so
looking at boss timers and having like a well set up UI also helps alleviate a lot of those questions that you would otherwise be having.
Yeah, so on Unat in particular, right, like we have range players just have a kick. Almost everybody in range, almost every range player has a kick that they are assigned to, that comes out while you're also doing other mechanics. So like, you know, at times in the fight, you're like dodging a big fear AoE that takes up more than half of the room. You're baiting an Oblivion Tear, which means that you need to make sure that you're not positioned in one of the best spots in the room. You have to be like somewhere towards the edge of the room and not near any of the relics when that ability is about to be cast. Otherwise, you could bait one in a really bad spot. And you have to kick your ad, and you have to kick your ad on the right cast as well. So like you're assigned to like the second kick on a specific ad, and you have to make sure you get that kick and not one of the other ones, and not one like none of the other ads and none of the other spots there. So you have to be like in range for your kick. So a good UI is really important for this. Like for Unat, I had a button that set my target as my focus, and then I would use that. I would click on my ad. I'd click that button, so my target would be focused, and then I have like a focus cast bar that's really big at the top of my screen. I had a weak aura that would like play a phone ringing bell sound when my kick was up next, and I had a weak aura that showed me my kick timer and showed me if I was in range or out of range of my kick, because as an elemental shaman, your kick is actually a shorter range than all your other stuff.
It's actually so useful.
Yeah, so like having the focus kick setup is kind of just important for M+. Like I use most of that functionality just in Mythic Plus to do my kicks there.
Yeah, I don't. Fucking solar beam.
Yeah, you're a Moonkin, so you don't really, you have a slightly different thing than a real kick going on, right? Like you have a different ability in that spot that does something similar, but doesn't need to be assigned in the same way. You can just kind of solar beam whatever, and it kicks everything. But yeah, so that like that kind of like UI, like I don't know. Also on Unat, like you have to storm, and when you're assigned to storm, you need to be tracking everything's health. Like you need to be able to storm when all the ads are below 25% health, when none of your friends are below 25% health, and so you need a user interface that conveys all that information to you in a way that you can parse quickly. Otherwise, you're just going to be in this spot where you take a couple seconds to like look and identify those things, and you're going to wipe the raid on a fight like Mythic Unat by doing that.
Yeah, so I have a question. When do you personally believe it's like worth to like re-roll off of something like your main, like a rogue, to something that's more beneficial for the raid or for like a Mythic Plus composition? Like, because I personally think that there's like, I think people are very quick to re-roll in situations that they don't necessarily need to. Like obviously if you're going for like world first or something like that, having like a really solid composition is very important, but I think by and large people are like really quick to reroll personally.
Yeah, so it depends on a couple of factors, right? Like it depends on what your objectives are when you're playing the game. Like if you're trying to do something other than, kill bosses as fast as humanly possible, like if you care about playing the spec that you like and the class that you like, you should probably not reroll off that. If that's something that's important to you, like that's the way you want to play the game. The only times you should switch off that spec is like if it's horrifically underpowered and like you want to do content that you're just not able to do on that spec. In my situation, like I wanted to kill the boss as soon as I could. Much as I, may be known for playing rogue, I didn't have a particular like attachment to playing the spec. I was just interested in playing whatever we had would help us kill the boss fastest. Now, this expansion I haven't been gearing alts really, so it's been rogue for the most of this expansion because I haven't been interested in like doing the work of gearing a bunch of alts and having them being ready. But it turns out that this just like random enhancement shaman I had was sufficiently geared to be turbo boosted to being a viable elemental shaman. So
yeah,
we decided that, or I decided that like I could do that, and so we did that. I think that there's really so many factors though that you have to be weighing before you're going to reroll it. Now, if what you want to do is not based on your class, like if what you want to do is raid as high as you can, do as high keys as you can, then I think playing a spec that does that really well is something you should absolutely consider doing. Yeah, like if you want to blast keys and you're playing a spec that nobody brings, like you have a lot of work ahead of you, especially if that spec isn't like, there are some specs like there are very few like frost mages in NA high keys. There are like 2 and they're fantastic, and I like them both a lot, but there's really only like 2 or 3, and but that spec is good. The spec is actually good. It's very good in keys. It's just not popular. So there's a difference between specs being not popular and specs being like fundamentally weaker than other specs, like strictly worse than other specs. And you need to make
Ellie's the same way.
Yeah, Elemental is another good example of a spec that is very good, but is also not very popular in Mythic Plus. And part of that is because it's difficult, and part of that is also that people just didn't have, like, not many people had a geared Elemental Shaman that did keys this season. But the reasons aside, like, if you were somebody who's an Elemental Shaman main, like you might look at everybody doing keys and you might conclude that you're supposed to reroll to rogue or something, and that's not the case. Like if you're good at Elemental Shaman, you could absolutely succeed with that, and it might be a challenge to get into groups in some cases, but it's a good spec. But there are a bunch of specs for which that's not true, right? Like if you're trying to just smash a square peg into a circular hole, then that's going to be a problem. And there are a lot of specs for which that would be true. So I would recommend rerolling off that. Now, another consideration with these kind of like should I reroll decisions is, are you going to be any good at what you reroll to? Like how long is it going to take you to get good at whatever spec you're switching to? And this kind of like, it depends on the spec, it depends on you, it depends on how similar the spec is to what you already know how to play. Fundamentally, like rotations in WoW are not that mechanically complicated compared to many other games. So if you are an experienced like gamer, if you play high level any other game that has an APM requirement, you're probably going to be capable of switching between specs in World of Warcraft pretty easily. But if World of Warcraft is like the only game you play like this, then that's probably not going to be too easy for you. And you need to consider that like you being at 100% at the spec you're good at, like it's going to take you a while to get up to close to that at another spec. And so that's something that, I don't know, Emily. I mean, if I were in that position, that would make me want to switch specs more so that I could get that proficiency and like work on that skill. But I think for many people that wouldn't make sense, right? You would not want to do that, right? You'd want to just play what you're good at.
Yeah, I downloaded a rotation helper for my Demon Hunter and Little Deer, so I'm a real alt gamer.
A rotation helper for Demon Hunter? Oh my goodness.
I was bad at pressing Blade Dance on cooldown. I needed it, alright?
That is an embarrassing spec to need a rotation helper for, I'm not gonna lie. There's 2 buttons.
Oh, I know.
I think you could probably get away with a macro that just like /cast Blade Dance, /cast Chaos Strike, and just put
I tried, but Blade Dance and whatever Blade Dance turns into whenever you're in meta wouldn't.
Oh, Death Sweep? No, man.
Death Sweep, that's what it was.
Yeah. Okay, that's unfortunate. They planned ahead. Blizzard realized when they were designing the spec that would be a vulnerability if they didn't make it not possible to macro
it. Yeah, I guess.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. I mean, using a tool like that like tells you what button to press, like that's a kind of a good shortcut to getting to like 95% at a spec, right? Like,
I mean, some classes are better than others, like at that, because some classes require a lot more like thinking ahead of like whether or not you should be like dotting an extra target or
yeah, Demon Hunter is a spec that does not, like, the rotation does not change no matter how many targets there are, right? You're just you
popping
basically
your damage
just
cooldowns and stuff like that. It can be kind of confusing.
That's true, yeah. So the Demon Hunter, you need to make decisions to like hold Eye Beam and hold Metamorphosis for AoE, but other than that, you're just doing the exact same rotation no matter how many targets there are, pretty much. Whereas other spec, like a spec like Shadow Priest, needs to make decisions about like Vampiric Touching, Shadow Word Painting adds, and that's something that rotation helpers struggle at capturing. Yeah.
When to hit your Blade Flurry, like when to actually hit your Blade Flurry.
When to hit your Blade Flurry is a huge thing for like. We could make an episode. We could make 7 episodes about like Blade Flurry timing in Mythic Plus, and I could talk about that for actually all day. It's
yeah. I mean, I'm sure you have to premeditate like how to actually use your Blade Flurry. Like obviously, AR is like a really bad cooldown for Outlaw Rogue, but like Blade Flurry is like it requires actual thinking.
Yeah, I mean, Adrenaline Rush, you could get away with just pressing Adrenaline Rush on cooldown in Mythic Plus, and you'd be fine. But Blade Flurry, like if you catch yourself fighting 5 mobs and you come into the pool with no Blade Flurries down, and the last pool was like 2 mobs, like you're gonna lose so much damage in that spot. So yeah. Anyways, we've strayed a little bit from our topic here, range DPS and raids, but I don't mind it. It was a good discussion. But I think we do want to just kind of close out with a brief discussion of what specific qualities make range DPS so good right now in raid, because with the exception of like Nighthold tier 20, the past 2 expansions, almost every raid has been dominated by range DPS. Like you'd see very few world first or top 10 kills that did not include almost all ranged, with a Demon Hunter for the debuff, or a couple of whatever melee spec are good, Rogues to soak and Tomb of Sargeras, Rogues to soak. Well, I guess Gul'dan was a fight where you could bring a lot of melee, and Nighthold was a good raid for melee, but besides that, most raids have been melee unfriendly and ranged friendly. So, Tettles, what are some of the things that make range DPS good in raid?
Well, in general, the fact that all the mechanics lend themselves poorly to melee, I think, is one of the major reasons that range DPS has been good in recent memory. Obviously, I think melee was like well tuned in Uldir. They did like a lot of damage, but again, it's just like anti-melee positioning is a lot of the reason that range DPS has been so good. In addition to that, there's a lot of range DPS classes that have these weird like AoE to single target conversion like abilities, where you're actually able to put like a dot on a secondary target and get single target damage gain out of it. Like notable things that come to mind are like Affliction Locks with Agony. Ellie obviously has like Igneous Potential and Lava Burst traits, where you're actually able to get a significant amount of single target damage from Flame Shocking a second target. Obviously, Shadow Priest has like Shadowy Apparitions. Destro has like Havoc with some of the Roiling Havoc traits too, right? I think
Destro is a good 2 target spec also, yeah.
Yeah, so just like damage conversion from from AoE to single target has been a big deal, because priority damage this whole entire expansion has been wildly different.
I think there's a kind of a distinction to be drawn here between like AoE to single target damage. To me, that conjures up like Sub Rogue, which was like 6 target damage down to 1, like 6 targets funneling damage into 1. I think that like a way to describe what range DPS are so good at is like cleave to single target damage conversion, right? Like 2 to 3 targets, 4 targets, Affliction, Elemental are going to be insane at that. There are some melee specializations that are also able to do some good from this. Assassination Rogue, for instance, like stab a second target to bleed. That's awesome for assassination. But nothing compares to like how the range specs do it. And another part of the problem is that like many raid fights, the adds spawn pretty far away from each other. So like even if there were melee specs that liked that for priority damage, of which there have been some, like Unholy with the right talent setup also does priority damage increases. Like the adds are far away from the boss, and melee can't hit things that are far away from the boss, whereas ranged can. So spread out cleave encounters, I think, are another thing that just ranged love, and there are a lot of those.
I think it also doesn't help that all the range specs are balanced around single target, like having the same single target as melee specs to some degree, if that makes any sense. Basically, like it feels weird to some level that all of the ranged DPS specs do the exact same damage on single target as like the melee specs whenever they have such an innate advantage with like how loosely they can position around the room. Obviously, like this cleave to single target damage that they're getting out is also just like really stupid whenever you really think about it. And then it's like, well, melees don't have exactly the best option in order to be able to compete. So they should be able to do a little bit more single target damage if you're just almost like tunneling 1-to-1 on a fight. And that's why personally I'm not a big fan of like cleave to single target damage conversions. Like obviously sub rogue was historically broken, but like we're seeing a lot of classes have this now. And with Legion to BFA cutting down on the general amount of AoE present in a lot of the classes, like most classes went from AoEing on 2 targets to now they're AoEing on 3 or 4 targets.
Or in your case, general, AoEing on 7.
I don't AoE anymore.
Yeah.
We only single target. But like most classes are like 3 or 4 targets for AoE at this point. So it's really putting all of these like multi-dotters in the forefront, and obviously most multi-dotters are ranged DPS to some.
Yeah,
obviously like
Assassination Rogue is the exception. Yeah,
not really multi-dot, but
I mean it can, but again, like a lot of fights that have been good multi-dot fights, like Stormwall Blockade, for instance, like those are ranged multi-dot fights. Like you can do some multi-dotting as a melee, but it's not easy like it is for ranged. Yeah, I think other things about ranged. So like we were talking about, like they do similar single target to melee. Now they do have to deal with movement, right? That melee doesn't have to deal with, but there are all these upsides that I think outweigh that. And I think that there are also like there are just a lot of raid fights where there are positional drawbacks to being or bringing too many melee. Like Mithrax pre-nerf was a really good example of like there's just kind of a hard cap on the number of melee you can have before the orb spawns would start to just be really problematic, because it's a spread mechanic, and spread mechanics are fairly common mechanics that say, hey, everybody in the raid get 5 yards away from everybody or get 8 yards away from everybody, and there's just a limited amount of total space near the boss that is 8 yards away from somebody else, and as you increase the amount of melee in your raid, you're just going to run out of that space. So and that's not true for ranged. Like you can have any number of ranged and you don't run into that problem.
Yeah, in addition to that, I think Uldir had like almost an opposite problem where the ranged DPS didn't get enough damage from being able to sit there and tunnel without any movement, where the melee had entirely too much damage whenever they could actually connect to targets. But right now, as it currently stands, the ranged just have entirely too much damage whenever they're able to just pound a target without any movement, where melee actually just in general do no damage. So the balancing has been really funky this expansion, I think. I thought Legion was very well tuned in terms of class to class balance damage wise, but BFA has felt like a completely different story.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that like I don't know, it's weird with these like Azerite being the system as well, because like you'd think that would make the balancing easier when there's one kind of Azerite build. Most specs have like 1 or 2 Azerite builds that are good, whereas in Legion there were like people were playing all kinds of different legendaries across spec to spec, and like buffs and nerfs and balance changes would change which legendaries were good very often. So it feels like that was more balls to have in the air, but somehow they ended up having a product that was quite well balanced, I think, for most of the expansion. Although maybe we're just looking back at it with nostalgia glasses now.
I don't know, man. It felt like it was better balanced. Maybe the balancing is very similar, and it's just people are being really kind of degenerate with how they're class stacking and everything. But it definitely feels like it's worse for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's kind of true is that as the game has been out for longer, like since the start 15 years ago, people have just gotten more and more degenerate with what they'll do in the high-end raids.
Residuum and all of that kind of stuff.
Battle of Dazar'alor, like what Method did in Battle of Dazar'alor is unparalleled amounts of degeneracy. Like 5 characters that like they each leveled like 5 different professions on just so that they could trade an extra piece of gear if it dropped for them on heroic, and that could be I mean that was unthinkable amounts of degeneracy, which is awesome,
Yeah, didn't Method like back in Wrath and Cataclysm or whatever like advertise that they rated the least amount of days out of any guild in the world because like how farm structures worked and you didn't have like alts and splits and stuff like that, right? I think that was a thing for a while now. But now that, dude, no holds bar. You're raiding like
Well,
5 days a week, even on farm, right?
Part of the problem with that is that there's an incentive to do that. Like there's a power level increase you can gain from raiding now that will help you in Ajara's Eternal Palace or whatever. And I think that's a design flaw in the game. I don't think that there should be power level increases you can get for next patch right now. At least if there are, they shouldn't be ones that you can split raid to get more of.
Is it because of Titan forging and
it's Titan Residuum? Like you do these split runs for the Residuum, right? So that you can have 2 455s or whatever on day 1 of the patch.
Well, I mean, people were really pulling out splits in Legion too. I think it has something to do with like Titan forging, and there's no real obtainable BIS for your
true.
class.
Yeah,
so
I mean, there was always better gear to get, but like
yeah. I mean, right now the Residuum is like ridiculous.
Doing like these 30-person heroic runs where 30 people are funneling all the Azerite to one person so that they can scrap it for Residuum, and like everybody else, it's that's something else. It creates. I mean, it's got to be rough to be in one of those high-end guilds right now because you really don't have like. I mean, like you can miss. I'm sure that there are just people missing weeks for farm, particularly in limit. I think they're pretty okay with people doing that, but I imagine most people just have to show up most weeks and spend a lot of time, and that historically has been one of the things that the world first guilds always talk about as being an upside of them, is that progression is like a sprint, but then the rest of farm, when all the other guilds are still progressing, you're on farm first and you raid 1 day a week, and that's not true anymore. So
I'm sure that's rough for you to be able to like coordinate that much time too. How much Residuum do you have right now, Drat? Do you know?
I only have like 4,000. I don't have. I haven't. I was rolling until my rogue was not going to be in on Unat. I was rolling for BIS still for Unat because I decided my priority was Unat over like a tiny amount of help for Ajara.
Yeah, I have like 8,000 or 9,000 right now, which is like they're not changing the currency, so I should be saving up. And I think for a lot of other people, like if you're questioning whether or not you should save up the Titan Residuum, basically, if you are in a top guild, which would probably clear heroic within the first week, you should probably looking to save it to some regard. But if you don't have BIS right now, you're probably fine to keep rolling it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, so right now it costs what, 1725 to roll a 415, and it'll cost something in the 40,000 range to roll a new best amount. So.
You don't even need the best. You can get the 15 item levels lower, and it's still
it's unclear what'll be the strategy that ends up being best for people. I imagine that in most cases your best strategy is going to be to just save up and roll maximum item level ones. I think that will do the job of killing the last boss in the raid as fast as possible best. But it depends on what your priorities are. I don't know. With these Residuum decisions, it always just depends on what your priorities are. I think that for most people, like having the most fun playing right now is a good thing to go for. So like if you don't have good Azerite in a slot, rolling until you do is a good thing. But like if there's like a slight upgrade that you can get from 1 out of 6 of these pieces, I wouldn't bother. Yeah, I would just start saving up that Residuum, which is a stupid incentive. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting incentive.
All right, speaking of next patch, the next topic that we have is the essences that are in next patch. So let's do a brief overview of what essences are. This is from the Wowhead Essence Overview. Basically, the way it's going to work is in 8.2, your Heart of Azeroth is going to get further empowered. You're going to be able to level it all the way up to 65 instead of 50. And you're going to get spots in your Heart of Azeroth to slot in these essences. Now, essences drop from like world content or from a bunch of different content. Each of them drops from a specific different place, and they all do different things. And in your Heart of Azeroth, you're going to be able to slot 1 essence in a major slot and 2 essences in a minor slot, and those minor slots are going to be unlocked over the course of the patch, whereas the major slot will be unlocked immediately. And each essence has a different effect depending on whether it's your major slot or whether it's your minor slot. Each essence also has a bunch of different qualities available. Rank 1, 2, and 3 are power level increases on the effect of the essence, and then rank 4 is a cosmetic change to what happens when it procs or when you use it or whatever. And they all, there's just a bunch of different ones that do different things. So for instance, Azeroth's Undying Gift When you slot it as a major, it's just a shield wall. Reduce all damage you take by 20% for 4 seconds is the green version, scaling up to an epic version that reduces all damage you take by 40% for 2 seconds, and then 20% for 2 seconds, and is on a shorter cooldown. And this page here, this Wowhead summary, is a pretty good place to go and just kind of look through all these. There are a bunch that have been kind of identified as being potentially very, very powerful, particularly for DPS. These are the ones that everybody kind of looks at first. Blood of the Enemy being one of those. So this one, when it's in your minor power slot, not your major power slot, is one that people are looking at as being very strong. It says your critical strikes with spells and abilities grant a stack of Blood Soaked, increasing crit by 29. On reaching 25 stacks, you gain 1,025 haste for 12 seconds, and has a 25% chance of only consuming 15 stacks. Oh, is this one different than before? Or is this the right one? This seems different than the one I was hearing about. But
it's a critical strike one.
Yeah, okay.
That one's really OP. Mm-hmm. It's just, I think it's just like over budget is like part of the issue. That one is.
I thought I remembered there being one that like every time you didn't crit, you got a stack that like made you, and when you got enough of them, you just like auto crit for the next 6 seconds. But I thought it was this one. Maybe it's a different one.
I think it's Blood of the Enemy. Okay. Maybe they changed it.
Yeah, maybe it's been changed, or maybe I'm just reading the wrong one or something. But either way, like that's an example of a minor power slotted one that I just mentioned in that thing. And basically, these are all very, very powerful. A lot of them, at least, are very, very powerful. You're going to have to make a decision about which one you want in your major slot, which 2 you want in your minor slots. You can't have the same one in major and minor, so you'll need to, if you want both, you're going to have to choose. And then there are some in particular, Blood of the Enemy, Vision of Perfection, Conflict and Strife, that look very, very. Oh, I think the Unbound Forces. Yeah, the Unbound Force is the one that I was thinking of. So this is the one that says when an ability fails to critically strike, you have a high chance to gain Reckless Force, and when it reaches 20 stacks, your critical strike is increased by 100% for 5 seconds. This one is one that, right now, the way it functions on PTR, there are a lot of abilities that just cannot crit, and so give you a bunch of stacks of Reckless Force guaranteed, and then let you stack up to 20 really easily. So like Implosion, Shadowy Apparition are examples of abilities that do this on PTR. Now it's unclear whether that behavior will make it to live, but that's, something that has been really, really strong for people testing on the PTR.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that Shadowy Apparitions and Implosion worked like that. That's a bit OP. Holy.
Yeah. So that's I guess that's kind of the overview of what essences are and how they work. And there are a couple of things that are like, for the most part, getting the rank 3 version of the power is pretty easy to do. On this Wowhead page, actually, there's a list of where the epic versions of each things drop, and for the most part, they're like, you do some quest line, or like they're time gated, but they're not like impossible difficulty gated. And then a lot of like the legendary version, the version that has the cosmetic increase, like this one's like, okay, defeat Queen Ajara on Mythic, and you get the cosmetic effect on this one. So like obviously that's a much bigger increase in how hard it is to find those. And I really like this system of like the epics are time consuming, but very doable. Like anybody could get any of these epics without much, there's pretty much no chance of failure. You just have to decide that you want to do it. And then the legendaries, like not everybody's going to be able to get those. If you want the legendary, for depending on which one, it's going to be a challenge, and that's cool.
I like that it's cosmetic. I mean, I like that it's not like gameplay affecting to some degree, because I don't really want to be looking to grind out some of, like there's one that's for like PvP whenever you get Elite, which is 2400, and I don't want to be really looking to grind out 2400 like the first week of. Yeah,
if that were a power level increase, that would be really, really toxic.
Yeah, it's just like toxic, because forcing people to do content they don't want to do is a bit ridiculous, but forcing people to do like easier content, like Dratnos was saying, like all of this stuff should be easily achievable for just like basically playing the game. So it's definitely something that you should be like, while the legendaries are cool and they're cosmetic, you're just not going to get all of them just because of how challenging and time consuming a lot of them are. But it's stuff that you're able to do, and it's a lot of content that you're able to do.
Yeah, now speaking of legendary, I think one comparison you can make when trying to understand how the essence system is going to work is to Legion legendaries. I think that you're going to have to. Yeah, thank you. I latched onto it when you said the word legendary. I was like, here's how we're going to do this segue. And then I was not paying attention to the rest of what you said. Okay, so yeah, speaking of legendaries, right? It's kind of like Legion legendaries in that you get to select one major power, and there are a bunch of options, but you can only pick one, and that's just like how Legion legendaries worked. Now there's also this major minor thing, so there's kind of like two different levels of Legion legendaries going on here. But I think that that's a very a way to think about these that will be helpful for people, is thinking about them that way. Now, there is one essence in particular that has caused a lot of discussion, and this one is Conflict and Strife. So Conflict and Strife teaches you a PvP talent and then lets you use it in PvE content, is how it works. And for each spec, there is a specific PvP talent that is mapped to this essence. So there's a list available, again, on a Wowhead post that we can look at. And you can see that, Blood Death Knight gets Unholy Command. Your Death Grip has 2 charges. And each spec just gets a different ability here, a different PvP talent that they could then use in PvE. Now, there are a couple of these in particular that people have identified as being potentially very, very strong from the ones that are on PTR. Those, I think that the two biggest offenders are the Balance Druid and Feral Druid ones. So Balance Druid gets Moonkin Aura, which says Star Surge grants 4% spell critical strike to 8 allies within 40 yards for 18 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. And Feral gets Leader of the Pack, which is, while in cat form, you increase the melee and ranged critical chance of raid members within 40 yards by 5%. And it also causes affected targets to heal themselves for 4% of their max HP when they crit with a melee range attack, so only physical stuff. And that effect can't occur more than once every 6 seconds. So basically, 2 extremely powerful raid buffs on these PvP talents that will do a ton. These are, I think, dramatically more impactful than Demon Hunter, Mage, or Monk buffs, all of which are very powerful, and all of which people bring one of those classes for those buffs, pretty much under all circumstances. What do you think about this essence and these specs in particular, Tettles?
Yeah, so I think the essence system in general has been okay. Obviously, I think it can improve a decent amount just by how it's structured. But Conflict and Strife, definitely sticking true to its name, causing a lot of conflict and strife between the community. Obviously, Sigma has a response.
Mm-hmm. This is a very important thing to mention, is that they're...
Yeah. So I'll read it out. Great. So the chosen abilities in PTR data are not final in particular. The ones that would clearly be overpowered or problematic in PvE, such as Leader of the Pack, so he names Leader of the Pack specifically, are generally cases where the final decisions of what PvP talent to give has not yet been made. And then he goes on to talk about how Conflict and Strife really wants you to be more of like a legendary ring style thing, where you get like a secondary talent or another honor talent for PvP. So they don't want it to be PvE focused and all. So PvP in general has had a lot of issues with PvE, trinkets and weapons and gear kind of plaguing it recently. And I think the overlap has been such that they have proven that they really are struggling to balance it. I know, obviously, in Legion, they had templates, which was the complete opposite end of the spectrum of being too bad, where it
didn't feel enough like an MMO, right? You didn't have your own character, really.
Yeah, you only end up sitting in that bubble of only PvPing, and there's no incentive for you to ever go in PvE, but now they incentivize it too much, and they almost, if this did in fact go through, which it sounds like from what Sigma is saying that they're not trying to do, it's going to end up allowing you to just continue to do what you find fun, which I think is very important in the game, is to allow people to have the choice to do what they find fun and to be successful in it.
Yeah. Now, for some specs, there are effects here that look very powerful. Like Mistweaver getting Way of the Crane is something that seems like that in Mythic Plus would be a very compelling essence to slot.
That's big damage.
Disc Priest getting Premonition. Oh, that's not the one I was thinking of. No,
that's not useful.
That's not the one I was thinking of at all.
Yeah, dude, he's gonna break himself out of CC with that.
Yeah.
Smoke Bomb, dude. If Smoke Bomb doesn't break some fight at some point, I will be shocked.
Yeah. So I don't know. There are some of these that look strong to have access to in PvE, but you have to remember that there's an opportunity cost associated with this. If you slot this thing in your major essence slot, you're giving up on one of these other powers. You're giving up on Vision of Perfection. Your spells and abilities have a chance to activate a spec-specific cooldown for 35% of its base duration, and these Vision of Perfection cooldowns are Metamorphosis, Avenging Wrath, Vendetta. These kind of extremely powerful cooldowns. So your trait, like, it's not like it's just like if your spec has a bad Strife and Conflict PvP talent, you're just going to be out of luck. I imagine that most specs, with the ones they have listed right now, even the good Strife and Conflict looking PvE talents, those aren't going to see any play because they're against these other options that are just so good. Vision of Perfection, those sorts of major powers. So there's kind of been some panic, like Warlocks that are like, hey, you know, all of these don't do anything, whereas other classes are getting DPS increases. But you have to consider it's not like it's not in a vacuum. Like most specs are just not going to take this. The ones that would get taken are if Moon Kenora and Leader of the Pack made it to live. I imagine you would see 2 Balanced Druids and a Feral Druid in every single raid that were required to slot these. Too. Yeah, what's the Brewmaster one? Brewmaster one is Hot Shroud
damage based on how much they have staggered purified, so it increases their damage like a ton, from what I understand. And then the way the Crane one could get taken, because it does increase their damage by a lot.
Yeah, and it's a good healing cooldown also.
I think it's okay for them to be niche, but not mandatory. I think a big reason why people were having major issues with this is because Druids were getting Leader of the Pack and Moon Kenora, and it kind of reduces what they actually wanted to do with like the Essence system. They wanted the classes to feel more fun and more impactful. And if you end up just becoming like a buff bot with Moon Kenora, Leader of the Pack, or whatever else, it's just worse overall.
It's not a direction that like the game should be taking away these things, not adding more of them. Like Demon Hunter, Monk, and Mage are in a bad spot right now, I think, because they bring these like mandatory buffs. So like every raid group has 1 Mage, 1 Demon Hunter, 1 Monk, at least. You can have more if the spec is in a good spot, but like this requirement to bring players of certain classes, it's something that we've had in the past. Like the game has had in the past. There was a time in like Wrath of the Lich King Cataclysm where you would just pull up this huge calculator that's like, okay, you know, there are these 10 different raid buffs we can get, and each spec brings like a different 2 of them, and you would like plug in your raid composition, you'd see which buffs you were missing and like figure out which specs you could add to it to add the buffs that you needed. And I think that moving away from that is a good thing. I think that making it so that like there are no specific specs that you need to bring for their buff is a good thing for live WoW. Like that kind of like utility of like, hey, I'm a druid, I bring Mark of the Wild, can be for classic and not for live, I think.
I mean, I think it can be successful if they bring back multiple per. Like if Demon Hunter and Warlock both had Chaos Brand, and then Shaman and Mage both had AI or whatever, I think it could be okay. But like just how it is in the current state, you end up like you said, just forcing one of each of these classes just innately, which is worse for the game. I would agree. I think I much prefer the Legion model of just not having class specific buffs in general, because it felt like not only did it open up your comp a lot, it allowed people to play what they really want to most of the time too. And I think we've seen a lot of issues with like people being forced onto Brewmaster, Monk, and Protection Warrior because they do actually bring the group wide buffs, right?
Yeah, Battle Shout.
Battle Shout and Mystic Touch, right?
Yeah, I worry about just like giving it to like a couple more classes each as well, because then you're just kind of going to get in this position where like you don't even feel particularly powerful because like you don't bring something that you just bring something that everybody brings, and then you just might get in the spot where you look at your raid group and just randomly you're missing one of these buffs because you don't have one of these 3 classes, and I think that'll feel bad. So I think the solution is just take them out, just get them out of there.
Do you really even need Battle Shout if you don't have any melee? I guess that's the real question.
Fair, yeah. And I've seen groups just you have your 1 Demon Hunter, so they get a scroll and they use it, and other than that, you know, there's no need.
Yeah, it's not worth. I mean, if you're running a full ranged comp with Demon Hunter, or like only 2 or 3 melee DPS, unless you have a Protection Warrior, because Protection Warrior owns, no need to have like a DPS warrior in.
Yeah, and you know, I think that another direction they could do is like if you just made the scrolls like 90% effectiveness versions of these buffs, and you made a scroll for Demon Hunter and Monk buffs.
Sure.
I would also be fine with that, but like definitely the direction that I think, and I think that they realize this, and that's why they make this blue post that says, hey, these aren't final, is that the Moon Kenora and the pack is the wrong direction to go with the raid class balance. Yeah.
I was really concerned with the Moon Kenora thing because that just doesn't sound fun. Like,
Yeah, so you'd go from this position where like instead of like every other class getting to like look at these 3 different powerful essences and like getting in this theory crafting of like which of these is going to be best for me, and like there's people arguing in your class Discord and like you're like, these guys are so stupid, they think this essence is right, but like obviously it's this one that's right, and you just like get a great parse with it and you're like, these, I'm so smart, I did the right theory crafting. Instead you're just gonna like it restricts choices, right? Every single balance druid, unless your braid has 5 of them, is going to have to play Moon Kenora if they can.
Yeah, and I mean, Visions of Visions of Perfection looks insane for Moonkin because it will either reduce the cooldown on your 3-minute, or it'll give you a random chance to proc your 3-minute, which is insanely strong. Mm-hmm. And it would just feel bad to be playing Moon Kenora where I'm literally just a buff bot.
Yeah. So I think that there's no. I imagine that neither Moon Kenora nor Leader of the Pack are going to make it to live. After this. Amount of after the amount of outcry, and given that they made this blue post, so I don't think there's too much to worry about there, but it definitely was a good catch, because that's the kind of thing I think if nobody mentioned it, it absolutely could have made it in.
Yeah. So what are your actual thoughts on like the Essence system as a whole? Do you think it's going to end up fixing all the issues that they've ended up having with like the removal of legendaries, making all the classes feel pretty flat to some degree?
I think maybe. I mean, I think Azurite was pretty close to a system that is good. Like, it's pretty close to the system where you swap around what you're going to play based on what the dungeon is, what the fight is, that kind of thing. The problem with Azurite is that it costs you money to reforge. So, like, the entire... I don't know. My problem with Azurite has been that, like, I just have these, like, different builds that I want to play for slightly different circumstances, and I think it'd be really fun. And I'm just looking at, like, having to pay to reforge and then pay to reforge back to my one that I'm going to use on progression or whatever. And just, if I do that, like, more than once a day, the price is going to go up, and that gets impossible to pay. So I think that Azurite is not actually far from a model that like lets you do this. I think that essences are, they look good to me. Yeah, I think that I don't know. I mean, I imagine that for most specs, you're gonna mostly see people play the same essences on the same fights. Like
on everything,
things are gonna converge to, maybe not on everything. Like maybe it'll be like, okay, this fight is one where you play Vision to Perfection, but like I don't expect that they will be so well balanced that you'll be able to just choose between 3 different options and have them all do the same damage, and just have it be like a playstyle choice or whatever. But that's okay. That's always true of WoW, is that like there's always a best choice, and with essences, as long as the best choice is fun, which it looks like it might be. Like it looks like some of these look very powerful and compelling, and so that's I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I think part of my major issue with Azurite is the fact that we're actually not able to swap into Mythic Plus, so we're not able to get a lot of value out of these niche situations that some of the Azurite would be good in. And then in addition to that, they're trying to balance all the Azurite around having generic options as well, which makes it very challenging, just in terms of like a damage balance between the generics and the class specific stuff. Like I feel like if they only had class specific, not only just essences but Azurite in general too, that it would be way easier to balance, because then they just have to focus on how much damage that class is doing as opposed to where are they actually getting their damage from. Yeah,
I mean, the state of it has basically been like, right now only the most broken essences or broken Azurite traits are better than Treacherous Covenant. And so like for most specs, you just play Treacherous Covenant, as many of them as you can get, and that's kind of been the benchmark. But yeah, like Blightborn Infusion, those sorts of generic Azurite traits are just like, most spec specific ones are worse than the full budget of stat proc that they put on those items. Yeah.
I think it kind of sucks that they removed gear swapping. Like I understand why, but it still kind of feels bad, because I don't really want to be swapping gear, because then I'm going to be swapping back and forth between like Lively Spirit and like other single target stuff. So personally, I don't think that's good, but I think it hurts the niche of a lot of the Azurite traits, which have like very limited use in general. Like you would actually be able to swap to like a massive AoE set if you want to do big damage, or then you'd actually be able to swap to a single target set, like similar to what we saw in Legion with gear swapping. And that for me felt better, but maybe I would have a differing opinion if it actually did come back.
I don't know, if gear swapping is allowed, then like suddenly I'm supposed to have like 50 items in my bags, and I'm supposed to swap like between like a haste set for single target and a crit set for AoE, and like I'm supposed to have like 10 different Azurite sets built and swap between them between every pull.
Okay, maybe because it's 3 pieces of gear, it might be a bit much.
Like that was what you were supposed to do with Legion Legendaries, right? And like some people did that in Legion, but not not everybody did that, but everybody in the very high end M plus community was doing that, right? Like you'd put on your AoE set and your single target set, and then like your super defensive set for the boss fight where you needed it to survive.
Yeah.
And
well, that was degenerate in itself. That was completely different though. The full defensive set was like a byproduct.
The tank trinkets, yeah.
Yeah, it was us pushing keys too high and higher than were intended by. So basically, Legion dungeons were limited by survivability, not damage. So you could actually afford to play like Giga defensive for a lot of these like one-shot bosses. Like Herja comes to mind, Shade of Xavius, both the first and last boss of Black or Cold, kind of too. So it's just you would just play super defensive because you could afford to. Whereas in BFA, I think they've done a better job of making the curve a little bit more.
There are some fights where you're like, this hurts a lot. You know,
Gilded Serpent is the hardest boss
Gilded Serpent
in the game.
Galvazit, the Axe Lady.
Yeah, Cool the Butcher. I think Galv is a little bit better because it's more of your healers on a timer as opposed to like...
You're just going to die for 100% Z's if you're out of cooldowns? Yeah.
Legion was like you die from 100 to 0. Golden Serpents, you die from like 75 to 0 if you're not completely top.
I think you're right that like that's been the difference between Legion and BFA. I think that gear swapping is not good gameplay, at least unlimited gear swapping. I would maybe be interested in like, okay, what if you could put on, like, what if you got 2 gear swaps per dungeon? Like, you know, you could switch to a different gear set, 2 times total per dungeon. Like, so like, you know, for a specific instance, you could use something, but you're not like obligated to have 10 different sets built and swap between them every pull.
That would be interesting, but I feel like they would not be able to implement that.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because you got like, okay, if I right click on a piece of gear, like, does this use my gear swap? Like, how exactly does that work? But I feel like they can maybe make rules for it.
I mean, that would be cool for like a MDI thing, though. I think people having more choice of what they're doing is better for the higher end, but I do understand where it becomes problematic for like medium key players, key pushers.
I mean, even though we would use it in high end keys, like it doesn't necessarily make it fun, right? Like, we are going to do the best thing to time the key, and like we're going to do that even if it's unfun, and that's something that they need to avoid. Like, they need to avoid giving us the option to do something unfun and broken. So I think that's definitely something that is good for them to watch out for. And I think that overall, like, no gear swapping is better than Legion gear swapping for Mythic Plus. So yeah.
It's hard for me to determine because obviously we look at it with the rose tinted glasses, and then
right, everybody looks back at Legion and like is you know, so favorable.
It's hard to say, right? Yeah.
It's really hard. It's just impossible to have the two side by side. And knowledge of Mythic Plus, like Mythic Plus is still, it was so primordial in Legion. Like we there's so much we didn't know, and it's just been out for such a short period of time that like now there's so much more knowledge about it. And I'm sure that in a couple of years, Mythic Plus is going to be even way past where we are right now in terms of how people are thinking about it. But if we could go back in time and attack Legion M Plus again, like if we got a time machine, could go back 2 years. I bet we could do amazing things with the tools Legion had that kind of hadn't been figured out yet at the time.
Dude, MDI and like doing the dungeons repeatedly actually gave like the biggest breakthrough in terms of like strategy of how to do dungeons, because a lot of the Legion pulls were very challenging to do, especially if you didn't have enough time to practice them. So getting people in the tournament realm and just kind of figuring out their limitations with how Blood Death Knight worked.
For a while on in Legion, you could do that on live, right, with depleted keys. Because you could just rerun the key depleted.
Dude. I forgot about that.
Yeah, so that was a way to like practice pulls. But nowadays, there's definitely like outside of the tournament realm, like you get a King's Rest 21 or whatever. There's no way to do a practice pull in there. Like your key, you start the key and you're either going to do it or it's going to turn into a 20.
All right, yeah, that old key depletion system was ass though, so I'm glad that they've changed that.
Yeah, it was not fun. But having like a practice key mode or something, instead of requiring us to like win access to the tournament realm, and then use that to do it is definitely something that might be cool. I don't know. Anyways, again, we've strayed a little bit from our discussion
Or initially, yeah, we got to gear swapping at some point.
Yeah, which that's always gonna be a tar pit in which we spend 10 minutes anytime it gets brought up.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's going to be a recurring theme on this podcast. Next time we have Trell here as well, that we'll see what happens when somebody mentions gear swapping.
Yeah,
I don't know what his opinions are on it, but I'm sure he has some. So yeah.
I mean, I think everybody's opinions on like what they think about gear swap.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So essences. Do we have anything more on essences that were there any kind of points on essences that we missed that you wanted to talk about? I think I got everything that I had on them.
No, I think I said everything I wanted to say. I really hope that Blizzard hammers down and makes 8.2 as best as it could be. Hope that they really rock this essence system. I think it could actually do a lot of good for them.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary, and definitely like don't worry too much if one or two essences look bad for you, because it doesn't matter how bad the worst essence is for you. It just matters how good the best ones are for you. Yeah. Okay. So I guess that's it for our main topics this week. We've covered some good discussion on these. Again, we'll be back next week. Next week, we hopefully will. Our plan is to be live next week.
We also have a special guest.
We may have a special guest. Yeah. Again, we'll see. You know, things are subject to change as the whims of time attack us. But hopefully that all works out, and we got a cool show next week with an awesome guest. So yeah, that's been our show this week.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for showing up. We appreciate it.
Have a good night, everybody, and we'll thanks for watching or listening, however you did this. We should be we should be on iTunes and stuff now. I guess let me just take a 30-second like plug of like everything. We should be on iTunes, Spotify, on our YouTube channels. So the plan is like we air on Saturday on Twitch, which this one should have aired on Twitch using the Twitch Premiere technology. Hopefully that worked out well. Hopefully that is working out well if you're watching that. And then it airs on YouTube on Sunday, and then iTunes and everywhere on the podcast feeds on Monday. That's our planned cadence of release of this podcast. So that's where you can find us. And then if you have any friends that you know might enjoy this podcast, tell them to listen to it. We'd appreciate it. That's the main thing. If you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I really like this podcast, that's the main thing I think right now that you could do to help us out. I'm sure that we'll have other ways for you to help us out in the future, but that's the strap for now. Anyways, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll be here again next week. Bye.
Later, guys.